This week, the first week of June, the theme is listening to the voice of the world. Listening to the voice of the world. And the acceleration of global change is essential to the evolution of consciousness and a new order of being. And so how do we manage to see light through the dark despair that many of us feel right now? And how might we effectively navigate the tides of change sweeping over us every day? And I think an inner prayer now is to let us live in this existential imperative as awakened and compassionate. Let us live in this existential imperative as awakened and compassionate. Compassion for everyone. Change is not something most of us enjoy. I think I said it several months back. I heard it said once that the only person who likes change is a wet baby. Maybe that's so. Some of us thrive on it when we can see ourselves, in the words of Eddie Galucka, leaning toward the good, moving this consciousness forward. So it's time for us to listen to the cries of the world. And when we listen with an open-hearted awareness, we discover how to respond creatively, bringing the sacred back to the ordinary. When we listen with open-hearted awareness, we learn how to respond creatively and by bringing the sacred back to the ordinary. You know, it was Mother Teresa who said, doing ordinary things with great love, bringing the sacred back to the ordinary. And I thought it would be interesting what does sacred mean? Bringing sacred to the ordinary. Sacred is an old word that means, another word for sacred is holy. Sacred means holy. And it's derived from at least the 11th century, from an Old English word, halik, which meant whole. It was a word that meant whole. And also from Scottish, hale, H-A-L-E. And that signified health, happiness, and wholeness. But it was mostly, it's uninjured, sound, healthy, entire, and complete. So by bringing the sacred back into the ordinary, it requires of our creatively awakened, beautiful, illumined heart to actually see what is before us, having this presence of the soul, bringing forth, practicing the presence with the whole new world from May. The whole new world is about looking with an awakened consciousness to what is, and recognizing if we can bring the sacred back to the ordinary, it means we will make the ordinary appear whole again. I love the fact that the word soul, S-O-U-L, which is our sacred center, is what powers everything we do. Also sounds like the word S-O-L-E, soul, which could be a fish, or it could be singular, meaning our singular soul. Our soul's soul, the soul of the soul, is the spark of the infinite, the beloved flame that ignites our consciousness, lights my speech, lights my breath, lights my heart, my being. And it allows me to see, with this light, it allows me to see what is without fear. It allows me to see what is without fear. And in oneness is freedom. So we are here to out our souls in a way. We're here to out our souls, to put the ego in service to the soul. We talked about this last month. And now we're being called to navigate the tides of change by first listening to the voice of the world. What is it saying? Listening to the voice of the world means bringing the sacred back to the ordinary. And each of us is called to listen our way into the underlying truth that connects us all. To listen our way into the underlying truth that connects us all. That is listening to the soul. The individualized spirit is unique in many, many ways. We are involved right now, we are immersed in peaceful protests to bring about freedom. Peaceful protests. And I thought about the word protest too. And a lot of people have the idea that the word protest means to act out against something. We're protesting that. When the actual word protest is from also Middle English, And it's a word that means make a solemn declaration. So a peaceful protest is peacefully making a solid and solemn declaration that we are for freedom. Right now, we are protesting peacefully. We are making a solemn declaration that all human beings are created equal. There is one human race, and we need to start seeing it. When one of us is not free, we are not one human race. Therefore, we're all not free. We're all not free. And it's more than just, letters on a page. It's got to be acted out as us in our beings, in our spiritual nature. So our oneness is in freedom, and it doesn't come from the oppression of others. If a definition of freedom for some people means keeping others down, that's fear-based too. It's interesting that the word sacred can be switched out easily for the word scared. And I used to point this out in creativity retreats when people are afraid to express or afraid to create. I would say the only difference between scared and sacred is the way you see it. So what if we remembered that we were all are one? What if in our remembering, it's a process of forgetting too, forgetting those things that seem to separate us out. Swami Vivekananda said all differences in the world are of degree, not of kind, because oneness is the secret of everything. Now, Swami Vivekananda came to the United States in 1893 as part of the first, what is now called the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, and he was preaching this message of oneness and operating from the soul. There was a lot going on in 1893. Like in the late 1800s, there were many people coming into the United States to seek a better life, And a lot of them ended up in Pittsburgh. And, one of the things I loved so much about living in Pittsburgh, living from this wholeness of the human race, was something that I got to experience growing up. They would have the city of Pittsburgh would sponsor this amazing event called the Nationality Festival. Actually, this town I grew up in McKees Rocks. And it was fantastic because it was such a celebration of the differences of the cultures that were here in the country. And it was a celebration with food, folklore, with dances, so in July, we would be out in this area where they'd have a great big stage and people everywhere. And in the air, it was a total sensory experience. You could smell the food in the air of all these different nationalities. You could smell the food in the air. You could go and taste it if you wanted to. You could hear the music. We would take turns singing and dancing. So I sang in the Italian dancing group. But years before that group even started, I was going to a different school and I sang and danced with a Russian dancing group. So I learned all their singing and dancing, sang all their stuff in their native tongue. And then a few years later, our church was built. And then we ended up singing and dancing in the Italian dancing group. It was so much fun. But I was mesmerized by the way we got to share our cultures. The Germans, the Polish, African-American culture, Italians, everybody was in one place for a week. I want to talk about eating and dancing. And what I found particularly amazing about this is any representative from any of these different cultures who took the stage to introduce what we were about to see and hear, we were dancing, we were hearing the music, we were feeling the energy of what, didn't understand most of what these other cultures were saying in different languages. You didn't need to, you could feel it. It was, nobody got up there and started to describe intellectually what their culture was about. They told us a little story and then they started to sing and dance. Why do I say that? Because it was a total sensory experience of the celebration of our differences in the human race, our uniqueness. And so anything that tries to describe or give us facts about how we are different or this group is not the same is nonsense. What I mean by nonsense is if you stood in front of a celebration like I did, it's a total sensory experience of truth. of a soul in full expression. You could never tell me and have me believe that any one of these cultures does not have a place of freedom on the planet. I experience their expression. The only way that happens is if an expression is oppressed and we don't get exposed to it. It makes it difficult. But if you're trying to get your mind around why it's right to oppress one group of people, for any reason, you'll never get your mind around it if you can get with the full expression of a culture or a group of people, because it's nonsense that will tell you otherwise. It's nonsense that keeps us apart from one another. Allow yourself to experience, live, move, breathe with everyone on the planet, and you get to experience the unique beauty of how they express this soul, the beautiful soul, that sacred ordinary. This is listening to the voice of oneness. This is listening to the voice of the world. The voice of the world is a soul expression, and it shows up differently. It's one sound, and the sound is fantastic. It creates a synergy with all of life, and it helps us to move beyond these things. I call it like a helmet of ideas that are in error, ideas that have oppressed many people for a long time. And now we are not standing for it anymore. We are peacefully protesting. We're making a solemn declaration that we are sacred. We're bringing the sacred back to the ordinary, meaning we are bringing wholeness back to humanity. Bringing wholeness back to humanity, one loving heart at a time. Ours is to open our own hearts so that we may be that light in the world. I get this idea of pushing through a new phase of consciousness. The acceleration of global change is essential to the evolution of the consciousness and the new order of being. It reminds me of saying a quote from Gita Bellin, who studied consciousness for well over 50 years. And her quote was, it's one that I remember from 30 years ago. It was, there are always risks in freedom, and the only risk in bondage is that of breaking free. There are always risks in freedom. The only risk in bondage is that of breaking free. So ours this week is to listen to the voice of the world. And that voice of the world is your singular voice inside of you. That where do you not feel free? Where do you not feel free? There's risk in freedom because then we begin to have options. And the only risk in bondage is that of breaking free. So allow yourself to risk breaking free. Out yourself, out your soul, and let it be a beacon of light to help guide other souls who are in the darkness, operating from fear, like this helmet of fear that's kind of been whittled over wired over our own consciousness. It's time to push through that. I love that two people went up into space, kind of breaking through the race consciousness of the planet and getting out into where the air is clear, breaking through. I kind of get this image of the Flintstones, that cartoon where Dino at the end, they end up, let's ride to the something down the street through the courtesy of Fred's 2 feet. It took me forever to figure out that line. They went to the movie theater at the end, and they're all sitting there, and Dino can't see, but he pushes his head through the roof of the car. Now he can see. I get that image of us as a collective consciousness popping our heads through the thing that was holding us down, the oppression that was making it too easy to not see who wasn't at the table. Some people haven't yet been seen enough to even know they're missing. So it's like Home Alone when the mom's on the plane and all of a sudden she realizes they left Kevin back at home. Kevin! Sometimes it takes us a while to realize, even when we are in a loving relationship with humanity, sometimes it's hard to realize what we're not seeing. So may we all be seeing through the eyes of love, but hearing the underlying voice of the world. The underlying voice of the world is sacred ordinary, oneness, wholeness, and peacefully standing with a solemn declaration of love and freedom for all. So we must start looking. It's time for us to start looking. It's time for us to be the love we came here to be. And I know many of you are asking, what can I do? standing in making a solemn declaration is not always for everyone to be out into the streets. It's not mine to do. I do it sometimes, but not always. What can I do from home? And one of the things is, there's this wonderful Chinook blessing that we put in soul sessions sometimes. And it ends with, for each of the prayers in it, it ends with the response, teach us and show us the way. And the Chinook blessing is, of course, praying to the Great Spirit. Teach us and show us the way. You can take that as a mantra throughout your week this week. What's mine to do? Teach me and show me the way. Just pray to the infinite divine love, the beloved, goddess, God, whatever you call source. Teach me and show me the way. And you'll know what's yours to do. The other thing you can do from home is meditate. Meditate on light. Meditate on love. And imagine the planet being lit up by your love, being held in the light of love. When you close your eyes, imagine the planet lit up in love. And it changes the vibration. And people who are afraid, it's a challenging time right now. Things are going to change. And may we approach it with love and oneness. Love and oneness, starting from within. Starting from within. It's interesting, this past week, I was talking to other spiritual leaders and some people who have been in ministry for a long time. And I asked them specifically, what is it when you're looking at the civil rights movement from the 60s compared to the civil rights movement that is happening right now in this country? What's the same and what's different? And what's the same is we're still trying to get the same freedoms, recognition. What's different is many of them said there's not one leader emerging as the unifier for all of this. There's not one emerging. I thought, that's interesting. What if it is that it is ours to listen to the voice of the world right now, for each one of us to be the leader? What if it's not us? We've already had leaders. We've already had Jesus. We've had the Buddha. We've had Martin Luther King Jr. We've had many come in and just try to take the lead. All of their messages are still with us. Their wisdom is here. It lives in ourselves. What if it's our soul call? Our soul call. What if it's for each one of us to do it where we are, right where I stand? I stand for peace. I stand for love. I stand in solemn declaration for peace. So there's a peace meditation. Peace begins with me. And I invite you to take a deep breath and stay in that peaceful zone.